So you have a thesaurus. Now what? What are you going to do with it? Well, what's your plan? Why did you, do this? Well, I mean, I have some suggestions what you can do with it. Well, you can print it. Yeah, I mean, people that printed thesauri. And you can put your monitor on top of it. Now, a lot of people do that. I mean, take a look at this. This is just A through C of the Library of Congress subject headings, which is not a true thesaurus. It's more of a taxonomy. But, I mean, look at that. I mean, you can put your monitor on top of that or whatever, use it as a doorstop. Now, these are a little bit more reasonable in size, of course, but they are printed. The National Information Center for Educational Media Thesaurus, which is ours, and we produce this, and the American Society of Information Science and Technology Thesaurus, which was last done by Alice Redmond Neal and Marjorie Lava. And then maybe you could get an autographed copy and buy it from. We did that for ASIS. But this is now available freely in terms of a web view. So you can go look at it and search it and navigate it on the web. So it's now readily available for viewing. Using, happens to use our thesaurus master tool for that web view of this full-fledged thesaurus. I'm going to leave these here so that over the course of the next few days, when you have a chance, take a look at these, because sometimes we were talking this morning about different aspects of thesauri, and it sometimes helps to see, peruse it. What does it really look like? And so this can be illustrative. To look at one in actual fact as it's been printed out. So I will leave these here up on the desk. So you can do something silly like put your monitor on it. You can use it, as I said, as a doorstop, or you can send it to your folks with a copy of your student loan. Maybe they'll pay. So look, I actually used my degree, my college degree. Maybe they'll do say, there's all kinds of other things you can do. You can archive it, and then you can send you want to make sure you do that, send a copy to your boss, right? Say, I actually did something, I accomplished something. You can post it on Facebook. Maybe you want to write a score for it, or make a YouTube video out of it. There's all kinds of things you can do with your taxonomy or thesaurus when you're done. So those are just some humorous ideas, but the question really becomes, what do you want to do with it? What are your ideas for developing a thesaurus and a controlled vocabulary? Now, there's nothing else to that slide. I really, at this point, would like to solicit your ideas, and this is voluntary. It's not a quiz, and we're not going to rate or rank your ideas as to, this is great, that's not such a good idea. It just, if you want to, this is an opportunity to share some of your ideas. And again, I'm not going to go around the room and call on people, but if you have some ideas that you want to volunteer as to, because the rest of my presentation is a list of a whole bunch of things you can do with it. And the first part is actually a list, very simple. And the last part are fleshing out some of those ideas in the list to see a little more concrete examples. But if you wanted to talk about some of your ideas, volunteer them, ask questions about, this is, right direction, we can, share some knowledge here and make it a little more interactive. So I'll see if anybody, has some examples or ideas of what they're going to do next. Or maybe that's why you're here, to figure that out. Yeah, she?
Why is browsing? Browsing, the users can go to your website and say what content you have, what's the area you cover.
Okay.
Then auto completion, hopefully, that they can search the taxonomy, so, and the auto completion will give some suggestions.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay,
of
auto
course,
completion,
if you like
browse.
this, we have something similar.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good, good. That would look something like, where is, let me go to here, and so it would look something like this. This is your browse on the, yeah, okay, you're centered there. On the left-hand side is your browse, so that you can go, let's say, pick computers and information science. There's 109 items there. And so you can drill down cybernetics, 6 items, and there seems to be a narrower term. Okay, there are 88 on robotics and 14 on artificial intelligence. So you can click on that and up comes your results set. And then on the, over here is using your thesaurus to guide people to other possible related concepts. And then the notion of type ahead that she mentioned. So, okay, that's pretty common to do that. But what we're doing here, that's in this particular presentation or implementation, and there's a whole wide variety how you can do this. Certainly do it on your own. It's hard to see, but it's, first of all, it's rotated, so you have, not only does it go that way, but it takes the terms on the left, so you have abnormal psychology. But those are all thesaurus terms, preferred and non-preferred. So you're bouncing it against your thesaurus to help guide the user on there. Okay, other other ideas or plans that you have for how you want to use your thesaurus?
So with AACR, the 2 main reasons for us to develop was to, as G mentioned, was the recommender system to identify articles that are related to what you're looking at, as well as to link up articles or the taxonomy usage with peer reviewers to identify peer reviewers more readily of papers that are submitted.
Okay, so there's 2 more ideas there, at least 2, not more. One is an idea of a recommender, that is using and actually you've raised a third point, and these are all on my list in that, but I'll mention that last. But the recommender is a system where you can, just to repeat what Arthur said, is when you do a search and you come back with a list that you see, and it's not implemented on this site here, but if you come back and you're drilling down on this 88 set and you click on that one, what the recommender would do is take null hits. So it's not linked. But what the recommender would do would be to, when you click, why isn't that just going back? I don't know. Sorry. There we go. Maybe I just wasn't waiting for it to load. But when you go back and click on a particular article, what the recommender does is look at the indexing from your thesaurus that's been applied to this particular article and finds the closest matches in your database. This is very, very different than other users looked at, or the last time you were here, we looked at, or you looked at this or that or the other thing. This is really the semantic fingerprint. It's actually profiling very tightly that particular article that you looked at, and looking at it. Because if you just type in a single keyword, it's going to pull, if it's been indexed by that keyword, the user keys it in and pulls up an article set. It's also going to pull up articles where that keyword is also in the full text, but maybe not indexed by that thesaurus term. So you're going to get a lot of different results in that set, potentially. But by looking at all the subject terms of the article of interest and pulling those up, you're pulling some from the existing search set that came up, plus potentially others, and doing a sort and relevance rank. So you can get, you can really point people to a great search set. So yeah, the recommender is a useful use of the thesaurus, but there's an implied use of your thesaurus or taxonomy in these, and that is labeling your content with your thesaurus. You actually, when you build the thesaurus and you get into Thesaurus Master and start building out your thesaurus, those are your thesaurus terms. On the left frame is the hierarchical view. Those are your thesaurus terms. They haven't been connected to your articles, your publications, your reference manuals, and any other digital object in your collection or your corpus that you wish to index. They haven't been, you haven't said this article is most appropriately labeled by this set of terms. That is a process called indexing. I know it seems obvious, but indexing is used, that particular term is used in other ways. You have back of the book indexes, so creating those indexes, which is very different than this kind of indexing. And your search engine, whether or not you've applied subject terms to the data, your search engine creates searchable indexes. So your search software vendor will come to you and say, okay, we're going to create these indexes for you. We're going to do the indexing. Yes, that's one form of indexing. But it's really important to understand that what we're talking about, when we're talking, semantic indexing is the assignment of the subject terms from this column over here, and all of the terms that you see there are assigned appropriately and most accurately to every digital object in your database. Mostly articles, but books, monographs, books and monographs, same. In many cases, reference materials, and other digital objects. So that's a very fundamental principle that you need to understand. Let's see, you said recommender, implied indexing.
Oh, review finder.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, part of the thing that you can do is, now that these articles are indexed and you have an indexing system, you have a vocabulary, as new material comes in, we have some customers that are taking indexing on the submission of an article and then using that semantic profile, that semantic fingerprint of that article to help facilitate the peer review process and the editorial, even just the editorial if it's not peer reviewed, to say, okay, what's the best editor, what's the best peer review team? Because you have a set of subject terms, and that speeds the process. Now, previously the editors for a particular journal, they got to read the whole thing and try to remember who's doing what and who are the best possible reviewers. But with taking your thesaurus and labeling your articles, your submissions, you can create an author database and a reviewer database. And based on the reviewers and the authors, peer reviewers and the authors in their previous publishing history, you can take the subject terms that have been assigned to their articles, put it in the author record, And then when a submission comes in, you hit it with some indexing. Now you take that indexing and you go to the author, peer review, your database of people, and you can pull out authors that are experts in that area. So those are some uses. Do other folks have other strategic uses for their thesauri that they have in mind? Okay, well, let me go back to the slide deck. So those are some great ideas, and they're on. Those ideas will appear in your slide deck on your from this presentation. So they're there for your review. So now we're going to just, like I said, I'm just going to go through a list of ideas and topics and things, and then we can look at a few use cases. I think one of the most important things you want to do after you've built your thesaurus is maintain it, as item 1 says. You want to keep it up to date, you want to keep it fresh. There were some ideas provided this morning about how to do that, and there'll be more ideas through the week, as well as Thursday and Friday sessions on how do you maintain it once you have it. One of the important steps is to take training courses like you're doing here. Thank you very much for attending. The meetings, conferences you might go to, if there are sessions on taxonomy management and stuff, to attend those. There are the thesaurus standards, and at ANSI NISO, and what is it, NISO.org, you can look for the thesaurus standards. Eric will talk more about standards after me. Reading those will help you with it. And you know, I know Jack mentioned, for example, monitoring your search logs. You do that on a periodic basis, and you know that's a good source. There are tools that are called generically novelty detection tools that can scrape websites, scrape your database to look for new concepts and new ideas that haven't been captured in your thesaurus. So that's an option for maintaining. The amount of time it takes to maintain it once you have it built is actually quite nominal. There's, in any discipline that you want to name, there's lots of activity, lots of things being published, lots of new ideas. The terminology doesn't necessarily change that rapidly. You know, if you're adding 5 or 10 new terms to your thesaurus a quarter, that would be a lot. So the amount of time it takes to do that is not horrendous. So it's a matter of building it into your workflow that you do that on a periodic basis, that you're consistent. And when you have a thesaurus management tool, or even if it's in Excel spreadsheet, a thesaurus management tool makes it a lot easier and a lot faster for you to maintain your thesaurus. You're more likely to go in and add a term or change a term. Terminology does change. Occasionally a 4-word term eventually becomes an acronym, and that acronym becomes accepted use, and then you could then invert and make the spelled out version the alternate term, and the acronym the preferred term. The classic example of that is laser, light emitting, and I can't remember the rest of it, but it was a long term that now is, the acronym is accepted preferred term. You can still use the long one as preferred term if you wish, and keep the laser as the alternate term. But part of thesaurus management, taxonomy management, is to maintain these relationships, make these decisions, but then maintain them over time. One of the advantages, and again, there are, of course, some of you have our tool, others are considering it, and we would hope that you would continue using our tool, or if you need one, to consider it. But there are other thesaurus tools out there. The advantage of using a dedicated thesaurus tool is it's easier to do those sorts of things, including things like keeping a history of those sorts of changes. Like, okay, when did this acronym become, the acronym itself become the preferred term? In Thesaurus Master, our tool, we do have a history field that you can keep, so you have that. So that's very important. And then the second point, which I've already addressed, is the fact that you want to index your content. You want to organize and label your content with your preferred terms. It seems obvious, but it's sometimes missed. And I see that more than most. Margie, Bob, Alice see that more than most, because we are also in the sales marketing role, so we're talking to prospects. You folks are a little farther along than that. But we get that, they're interested in the thesaurus. How do we build one? How do we get it? Can we license? That sort of thing. And of course, part of the discussion is, well, what do you want to do with it? I mean, what's your strategic goal for having it? And sometimes those are a little on the undeveloped side, to be kind. In others, they're not really sure. It's not on like any new technology. Sometimes someone 3 levels up says, oh, we have to have, this, go get one. Now what are we going to do? It's also often a certain area in a company, in an organization. Even, we have some associations here, nonprofits, .orgs. We also have enterprise customers. And Bob Kasenchek and I were on the road last week, and we made some calls with existing customers and prospects. And what we were finding is that there was an interesting difference. There was like one group, we talked to them, and yeah, we have the thesaurus, and yeah, it's all, what are you doing with it? Well, we have it, and they're not doing it. Then we have this other group that are really moving forward, and we had these meetings where they brought in constituents or representatives from major aspects, business units. These were some of them were nonprofits, but we still call them business units, that came into this meeting because they're spreading the word about the fact that the folks that are selling AdWords have a vested interest in this controlled vocabulary. So that's a wonderful thing. But so their content needs to be indexed and brought into the fold. Okay, you can integrate it with existing operations. What you see there mostly are database or content management systems. I didn't list, but we've integrated with a great many publishing platforms and applications. EJ Press, Publishing Technologies. We've worked with Really Strategies that does MarkLogic implementations. They take the MarkLogic core and they build applications on top of it. And they also are an integrator. They help make it work. So, and we've worked with Lucene as an example of an open source search software, but we've also had in days past the MarkLogic retrieval engine and quite a few other search software packages that have integrated with the thesaurus and other tools. So integration is another important use and way you can leverage your investment. Questions on any of these three? And again, I have more slides later on. That if we don't get to, that's okay. They're a little denser, have more text, and you go take a look at them on your thumb drives, and I think they'll be self-explanatory. So, any questions at this point? Okay, the next set here, web navigation. We've mentioned that. We've looked at, and I have a slide later on from Charlotte ASCE about that, and we'll look at that later on about web navigation. And I showed you a quick example at a site called mediasleuth.com of use of pushing the thesaurus out of your thesaurus tool, thesaurus master or Excel or whatever you're keeping it in, and pushing it out, and having indexed your content and creating a navigation capability with your website. PLOS has done that. They have a nice implementation, and they've done. That's what I was up before I bailed. See if it's still there. Yeah. Am I centered? Yeah, you can see that. So they have. You go to PLOS 1, and they do it slightly different. Here's the subject areas. So they have, and it displays differently in different browsers. This is Safari, so Internet Explorer it might display a little differently, but there's their top terms. Is that all their top terms?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sometimes, I mean, when you push these things out, you have to think like from your thesaurus tool. You push your thesaurus out for this sort of navigation, or the one I showed you at Media Sleuth. That particular one, you have to think about. You need to make some decisions, tactical decisions, about pushing out the whole thing, which is what we did here. All of the top terms, some of the top terms. Maybe, do you want to go out all possible levels? If you have a thesaurus that's hierarchical, so it's a taxonomy as well as thesaurus, and you go out 8 or 9 levels, get down to real detailed terms. When you push it out for this sort of web navigation, there are some issues. You don't have to push out the whole thing. Maybe you roll up, so only the top 2 or 3 terms are displayed. So if we look at, so maybe under computer and information science, we only, instead of going down to every level, we only do the top 3. So in this case, cybernetics, which has 6 of its own signed there, artificial intelligence and robotics with 88 and 14, well, those numbers would get concatenated, and you roll up to just cybernetics, and you'd have 100 and some items there. And that doesn't mean you're losing the indexing. You're just changing the navigation that those items would still be indexed quite precisely with robotics or artificial intelligence with a great deal of precision. So you still have that. You could still do the type ahead or auto completion that we did with, when we typed it in there. You can still do that and have all those terms, but for display purposes, maybe you want to, think about it strategically but think about it from the user point of view. Your audience, who you're going to. If your users are primarily members, your society, or if you're an enterprise and they're primarily employees, it's an in-house group. So, well, then maybe the full thesaurus is good. But if you're developing a site for the lay public coming in, if you're a net large commercial enterprise, a good example would be pharmaceutical companies. So, our approach to pharmaceutical companies is to build a single thesaurus, but you map, generic to you've got scientific name, you've got a generic name, you've got maybe a trade name or something. Aspirin, acetylsalicylic acid. I think that's right. Acetaminophen, Tylenol. So you have that kind of thing you can do. Of course, mixing proper names or product names with subject terms you have to think about doing that. But you can maybe push out different views for different audiences. So those are some things to think about, so that when you go down to the life sciences here, and you start drilling, agriculture is under life. Okay, these guys build. I know. How agriculture. Oops, sorry. Mouse challenge. So you start drilling out, and it does keep a kind of almost a virtual breadcrumb trail in their implementation, because it's only showing 3 there, but you can use these arrows to see where you are, as you drill down. And there are 735, I'll read that in case you can't up there, articles at this point below you. So navigation is, I think, one of the most important uses. Term mining and visualization. There is probably the broadest area is data mining, heard of that term. Then text mining. Then we've coined a little term, term mining. Both data mining and text mining. You can do any corpus that you formatted for the software to work on, and it's often used in intelligence for things you're not sure what's going to be out there. You're not sure what you'll find. So it can be good in discovery circumstances. Term mining is, like I said, we've coined that phrase to do, if you will, text mining against your thesaurus or your controlled vocabulary. So it's much more precise, and you're not necessarily going after a specific thing, because if you're going after a specific term, then that's just a search. It's not really mining per se, but if you pass the whole thesaurus against a corpus, indexing against a corpus, and pull out content, and then you can map it visually. And we've done work like that. We've had presentations here in the past from, for example, a project we did with IEEE. Some of you may have seen those slides because we trot them out frequently, showing the different kinds of visualizations you can do to learn things about the environment that you're studying. So that's another extension and way to gain additional value from your thesaurus. How you can leverage it is term. In IEEE, they're looking at was the distribution of topics across their journals. They have 33, 34 different sort of societies under IEEE, or divisions, if you will, and each one has journals. So I don't know how many that adds up to. It varies with the division, but that's a lot of journals. So as a whole, and everybody has their specialty in their favorite area, so it's a bit siloed. So one journal editor isn't necessarily talking to another journal editor. So doing that sort of visual mapping, you can see, where, what subjects are being covered, and how many journals have a heavy overlap. They found one journal that hadn't really published in their primary area in quite a while. They drifted off. And if the users are happy, that's fine, but maybe you need to look at the editorial policy and see, what is happening, why is that? And maybe there's a need at that point to make changes in, the name of the journal or how you advertise it, who you're targeting for that content. And maybe, there's some additional work on your thesaurus you need to do. Maybe you did a little work on your thesaurus. That's an area that hadn't really gotten covered well in your thesaurus. If you re-index it and do the visualization, it would come back into what it was considered its editorial focus. And we've just, because examples that you folks are doing, we talked about author networks or semantic fingerprinting. And again, that's where you take where you have authored content, which is not always the case, but where you have authored content, publications, research reports, so on. So my comments are a little out. I think most everybody here is from publishing industry, but we have other people, other customers that are in enterprise, but and even associations and publishers publish content where there's not necessarily an author. But anyway, that aside, you index your content, you map that indexing to each author, and then that's the basis of doing all kinds of interesting things. We mentioned helping manage the peer review process. You can also do things like, if you have an upcoming conference, it's a new conference or a seminar or a webinar on a particular topic. Well, what would be the 3 or 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or whatever, main keywords or subject terms from your thesaurus that you would use to label overall this particular new seminar? You do that, then it's easy to do very specific targeted advertising, if you will, that won't be viewed as spam because it's like right into their subject area. Doesn't prevent you from doing broader advertising, but it does help you target your advertising. So you can direct members to those sorts of special events. You can direct them towards other content of interest to them because you come up with a new reference book and you can get the word out to them. You can facilitate social networking within your community, communities of practice or areas of interest or disciplines. All of these can be brought together, and using that semantic fingerprinting to facilitate that process and make it make it more robust. Linking and mashups. This is another powerful thing that you can do. By using your semantic fingerprint that you've attached to articles, in the process of doing the indexing, we can do something called inline tagging. And that's marking in the text string that triggered the suggestion of that subject term. That's the indexing process. Well, we can put XML tags around that can contain all kinds of additional attributes about the term that's been marked up. You can link to Wikipedia. You can link to your own internal resources. For example, if you had reference manuals, if you had glossaries, if you had engineering books that had specifications and standards in them. Those are digitized. Then from articles, you can link right into the exact paragraph. You can link out to external resources because you've got an XML tag around. You can put anything inside that XML tag that you want on an automated, put it there in an automated basis, and that can link out to URLs or URIs. that again could be internal to your own resources or other websites outside. So linking and mashups, pulling in, that's how you can pull in maps and things like that. Knowledge management. Lots of folks are heavily involved in knowledge management initiatives. This is particularly true in enterprise and government. By using the semantic indexing on both content and people, that's a good way to, for example, identify number 9, find an expert, either internal or external. So it's number 8 and number 9 are very similar. Find an expert. So that's another implementation of your thesaurus, is to facilitate knowledge management and find an expert. Matching up things, and we've referenced these separately or under other items, but member to member, member to users, the way of bringing people together. I mentioned communities of practice, a way to create that. Member resources, or resources to your members, or if you're an enterprise, other resources in the company and bringing them together. So mapping up all of those options and bringing people to them and bringing making them aware of these things. We've talked about the recommender as a way of surfacing content that seems to be right on the interest of the user based on their selection of a particular article or a particular item that they've done in their initial search. So it facilitates that. I showed you related term navigation. I'll show you that again just because it's sometimes helpful to see. See it in, so if I go back to our example I can remember, and I go to abnormal psychology, and then you can see these terms. Now there's only 11 under that topic, so it shows that there's a narrower topic, but it also shows some related or broader concepts. And now what we're looking at here are items that may be of interest. But if you're a broad publisher like PLOS, or JSTOR that indexes and archives a whole, across a lot of disciplines, related term navigation is one of the best ways of surfacing content that the user may not have thought about. Because they get focused, particularly, people, students doing research, their term papers, scientists doing research, they get pretty narrow in their thinking. They're in a hurry, but you can surface your I'm a chemist, and I start looking at chemistry terms, and you surface via a related term something in biology that's related they would not have thought of, so they can click on that and look at that. In e-commerce, of course, what you're doing is mapping. This is more prosaic, but you're mapping. Somebody's looking for bicycle seats, and you've mapped that to helmets and sunglasses and other things that that are related. They're not in the category or class of bicycle seats. And sunglasses probably wouldn't even come under the bicycle hierarchical term if they were to drill down. They'd, put them under vision devices, so I don't know what you'd put it under. Alice is grimacing back there. They don't let me work on thesaurus, But but it's related. It might be useful. So that in terms of buying things in commerce, you see that done. But your thesaurus, of course, which also can consider controlled vocabularies, not only subject terms, but also, you can control lists such as product names or geographic names or other sorts of what we call authority files under your controlled vocabularies. You can manage them there and do this kind of relationship building. So to help with the navigation. Oh, so that, again, it's just easier to see what I'm talking about when I say related term navigation. Mapping terminology differences. And this is something you do during the build, but afterwards and continuing. But initially, you might get started, particularly if you're in the publications area, of building out a subject term thesaurus that's appropriate to the content that you publish. But as you build it out and expand into other areas, and you expand across silos in your organization and different business units, you want to build out your thesaurus and start building these related terms and mapping them across it. So that types of mapping that you do, different languages, if you will, is like department to department. What something is called in accounting is not necessarily the same thing as it's called in production. And this does apply to the society, you folks from associations. Because again, to leverage your thesaurus, you want to start thinking about, well, what are the marketing people doing? What are the membership people doing? And what are they calling things? And, can you map their terminology? Generally, in a association publishing, your first thesaurus is to should be built to index your database, your back file, and your new publications of your primary publications of the content you produce. But once that's done, then you might want to build that thesaurus out a little bit to start thinking about, well, what sort of things might map to some of the terminology in marketing, or some of the terminology in finance. Or maybe you want a different branch for that. But and how do you map, in the example I gave earlier, in pharmaceutical, how do you map what the bench chemist would call something versus somebody coming, a lay person in coming to your website, trying to find out more information about a particular pharmaceutical that's been prescribed by a physician. And then mapping things like generic, and that's the case of generic to trade to scientific, doing that kind of mapping. Old to new. We're talking with some, we have customers in the UK, and we were talking to one publisher there that's been around forever, and I mean 1700s. They've been around a long time. So one of the issues is they have digitized a lot of their historic publications, and it's a science publisher. So the terminology that's used today doesn't necessarily match the terminology that was used in the 1880s. So one of the things you can do to leverage your thesaurus that you built to index your, is to make sure that you extend it back and map those older terms. Either they are perfectly acceptable primary or preferred term, or you map them as an alternate term to an existing preferred term. So, but you want to make that kind of mapping. Different views. Another way to leverage your thesaurus is to provide different user groups with different views of the thesaurus. So, different looks at it, whether it's a back to, I had it open, there, no name, admin, there it is. So you have just the hierarchical view, which is what we saw in the hierarchical view in Media Sleuth website. But in Thesaurus Master here, you can see that we just have the standard hierarchical view. But an alphabetic view, for some users and some uses, it might be quite useful. So you have an alphabetic view. Let's see if this works. Yeah, so you have that did work. So sometimes it depends on the server whether it's on. That dynamic view is actually been installed. So there's a dynamic view, and that's just a different way to go and navigate. There's no narrower terms there, but if I click out, if there are narrower terms, this is a pretty small thesaurus. So you have all kinds of other views that you can provide. The permuted tab view that you could, not only for your own management of the thesaurus, but providing other users in the organization or outside. So there are lots you can do with different views to get more value out of it and get more use. Okay, facilitate cross-marketing. This is an example of sort of a related term, but getting other content elsewhere in the organization index so that when somebody's, you're primarily indexing your journal literature, but think about your monographs, your reference books, and getting them indexed, and then serving those up. Well, they're looking for articles, but over here you show related content in other products that you have. And that's also the example of searching for bicycle seats that I mentioned earlier, and you say, well, a related item is sunglasses and helmets and insurance. You could sell that to an insurance company. Think about it. I mean, they ought to do that. I don't know why REI doesn't do that. Maybe they do, I don't know. But you could pull up, we specialize in insurance for folks that commute on bicycles and, use their bike a lot, like commuting to work. So they have special insurance. And then B2C, B2B commerce. By driving better content, more precise content, by moving people to more precisely, accurately to different resources, different websites, etc. And there's a whole list of others. So the 17 is etc. Has this triggered any other ideas? Any other comments, suggestions? Things okay, well, let's, the benefits, and now I'm getting into where that list of 17 was etc. The list of 16, I'm starting to flesh out though, and I did that verbally, but the slide set now that you'll have starts to flesh those ideas out, so when you get back and get in your office Monday, your head is full. That hopefully that this will provide additional meaning to those lists. So it really, the primary reason for a thesaurus and doing indexing is to improve search. Search doesn't work very well without this. That's why thesauri are very popular now, and it's a major driver for us. And that's because full-text search engines that came on strong in the 90s that promised install and walk away, well, yeah, but the users were not happy, whether it was public-facing search or intranets, search inside a company. They just weren't happy. Part of it was because they got the search engines sufficiently sophisticated that they became federated, or they could search across different platforms within a company, different software applications, different types of databases. So now people are getting things back from 50 different places, where before the marketing people only had their little marketing thing, and they got stuff up. Hard to find, but that's all they had. Now they have stuff from 5 other places. And assuming they have permissions, because they lock those into permissions when you're doing an enterprise implementation. So search, despite what they say, without that kind of additional semantics, doesn't work very well. Website navigation, we talked about a bunch. Different views, pick lists, that sort of thing. The long tail of your content, that hadn't been mentioned. The bottom one down there. That's a way to surface material that has been overlooked. Because maybe there's like a hot topic, and that's where everybody goes, and so just that stuff. But if you have it mapped, like this recommender, so you pick something in a hot topic and click on it, and the recommender pulls up stuff, it might pull up some older material. It might pull up stuff that was indexed by a related term. And it also, generally, you can set your search engine so maybe it sorts by publication date as part of the parameters for relevance, but pulling stuff up that's been indexed by an important concept of something published 50 years ago. The fact that it was published 50 years ago doesn't mean that it isn't still very valuable. But we tend to forget that. The lifespan, in terms of, is like 90 days, it's sort of like usage, just sort of when things drop. But when you've indexed your content properly, you can raise the usage of some of that material significantly. Because a lot of fundamental science is still very valid, and that's why students at all levels, and undergraduate, graduate students, they need to understand the foundation of a particular discipline, not just jump into the latest hot topic and the publications of the last 60 days. It's like, well, where did that come from? And then they find out that Grandpa actually was involved in inventing the transistor along with Shockley or whatever his name, and there's other folks. Maybe he knows something about that, or she knows something about it. Grandma's back there doing that programming. So the long tail is a good one. And I mentioned cross-marketing, search engine optimization, I hadn't mentioned. That's one thing that can help with search engine optimization, is if your content is well indexed and you surface your thesaurus. Even if you don't provide that hierarchical view, but in terms of your web design, even though it may be not exactly visible, but if it's one layer down so that the search engine, or if it's in your site index, where you go to a site and you're down there to look at the site index, if it's in there at the first or second layer, then the search engines will pick that up. It also allows you to keep your search site, your websites, fairly flat. By using a thesaurus to spread, you can keep the content fairly flat, but still have conceptually quite hierarchical. But in terms of the way the Googles and the Bings go and crawl it, here's a tip on search engine optimization. Google, with all its horsepower, and Bing, etc., they still don't have the time to go down more than 2 layers or so. Unless you're, one of the top 10,000 sites in the world, they're not going to go very far down when they go to, index your website. So a thesaurus can facilitate that by putting it in, very high up And because the thesaurus itself is hierarchical, when you provide the view, it looks like, conceptually that maybe, you're going in all of these levels. You're going down to that, what is that, 5 or 6 levels. And you are, in terms of the taxonomic structure, the semantic analysis of that content. But in terms of the search engine, Google, etc., the actual content, 6 objects under CD-ROM there, can be at that second layer. But so that it can facilitate search engine optimization in quite a variety of ways. Provide easy use current awareness, visualization, tag clouds, etc. Tag clouds can become, that was real popular for a while. Maybe the fad may be fading a bit, but if you want to do something like a tag cloud, if you're using your thesaurus terms, you have much more meaning in that tag cloud than if you're using just every term that happens to be in your corpus, every word. So you can, enhance search functionality, tag the content. You can extrapolate into all of, mention those things. Where is it used? Surface it on the left side there. Drill out. We saw examples of that, live examples of it. You want to leverage it for as many applications as you can. There's another list there. Assign articles to reviewers, we've talked about. Deliver topical content. You can build new products much faster. Because stuff is labeled and something's hot. You can, what do we have on that? Well, prior to this kind of implementation, you'd sit around with the editors of it. And often it was siloed, so you'd sit around the editors with whoever you're with, and you're not even thinking about the publications in the other business units. But with this sort of thing, you say, well, let's bring together and see what we have. So you can bring resources together, and with linking and mashups and linking out, you can then quickly bring in other resources to that quick little product page that you're going to put up on an area that has surfaced as being, quite interesting. So that's linking out, the navigation. I showed you that page, semantically similar terms for navigating. I showed you a live example of that page of drilling down on the recommender, semantically similar items. So here's where you see the document. This is like a sample page of a recommender implementation. So the article you selected is on top, and then the ones below it are similar in content because they have the subject terms most closely mapped to the one you selected. And that's just one type of view. You might want to put the similar content in a different, maybe a frame on the left or right or something. This has got it at the bottom, but that's arbitrary. That's a design issue. Linking out, we talked about. Here's what that might look like. This is just where the term crystalline has been marked up in an article. That's a subject term that we found, and this article is about crystalline. So what we've done, we've put the XML tags around it. Say that's our subject term. But if I have a slide down there where there's the same crystalline term, where we've put the URL to a Wikipedia page. So someone mouses over that and then click on it. It's their option. I mean, it's not going to take them out of there. And then this is where it's an example of linking it to, in this case, a legal thesaurus. So the term in the article, murder, where the arrow's pointing to, is linked, that's a thesaurus term that we've identified, a subject, that's a subject term from a thesaurus that we've identified and marked up in the text. And we've put in a mouse over a dictionary definition from a law thesaurus, as opposed to, it's very different from Webster's. You get a law thesaurus, it's going to tell you more about, and then inside there you could also link out, you could then add links to other resources. Murder's pretty broad, maybe it gets down to a certain type of incident that you are linking out to. So those are some of the kinds of information you can put inside the tags, that you've marked up in the text. It's a design issue. There are not any limitations as long as you can programmatically, make that connection. And then this is an example of integration that I mentioned in the list of integrating to other applications. In this case, SharePoint, and how you might make that happen. And once the linking's done, the red circle is our software, Data Harmony, built into the SharePoint application, so you can index content being ingested into the SharePoint repository. So you get all those benefits better. And then here's from Charlotte, thank you, ASCE. This is several years ago, 2009, or they were doing some wireframes. So that's a mock-up they did in terms of trying to design it. But what we like to show here is all the areas where your controlled vocabularies, your pick lists, your different things you're controlling, including subject terms, might be used to help, guide. Like this one here, it's just find a local group, so on, that you can use to as possible ways of leveraging your thesaurus. And then this is from AACR, American Association for Cancer Research, of ideas they had about once something, like if an article is indexed, and then you can use it for all of these other applications or uses. Facilitating the author networks, driving people to job posting. I hadn't mentioned that one. You can index job postings and then map them to, it's easier to have members find those job postings that way. And I like to jump right out to live things, so I've shown you that, but the media, but it's in your slide deck, so you can take it home and remember where I was. This is an example of a rule, but you had some rule building earlier, and you'll get some later in the week if you're here Thursday or Friday. So, and these are just some, we have quite a list of government and media, and Walter Kluwer's Health, IEEE, enterprise, and these are all things, and then just what I like to throw in our customer slides. So how to leverage, how to get more use out of your thesaurus. You're putting a lot of time and effort into it. There's a lot you can do with it to get tremendous payback. Just providing better search to your members will pay for it in and of itself, because member retention is key. It's very important.